And so I think that there was something, maybe social emotional that the kid was missing, that they lacked the confidence to be able to do it alone, and they needed a coach by their side while they were doing it. And so I was glad to be able to not only help the kid in that moment, but also help the parent to say, look, it's not your kid's fault. They're not being oppositional. They're just not able to do this at that time, and that's what they needed.
Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we're actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can all still be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Dr. P. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I was a sort of working class kid who worked really hard, got into Harvard by some miracle and a lot of hard work. And when I graduated, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. There weren't a whole lot of people in my family who had college degrees. And so I didn't really have that many role models. And so I kind of tried a lot of different things after graduation. And my mom said to me, you've always tutored other kids. Why don't you try teaching? And so I did try teaching. And as soon as I stepped foot in front of a classroom, I knew that was what God put me on this earth to do. And I did do full-time teaching for about 10 years. But after that point, things began to get a little stale. I wanted a new challenge. And so in 2014, I opened up Crimson Coaching, which is my own academic tutoring, test prep, and college consultancy. And that's what I've been doing full-time ever since.
Very cool. And the first question that pops into my mind is, was that the route you went because you saw that there was a need in your students where they needed that kind of extra help?
Well, I always knew there was a need because even though I had gone into full-time classroom teaching, I always kind of still tutored kids on the side, just as I had done as a high school student and during Harvard. So I knew there was always a need. And I really enjoy that one-on-one back and forth with a student because you can really see their gains much more than when, they're one of 25 in a class. Sometimes kids who are extraordinary, you might see a big gain from beginning of year to end, but I think it's much easier to make an impact when you're working with a student one-on-one for weeks on end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of the basis of coaching, right? Is
exactly
that one-on-one support. And I'm the only person in my family that's not a teacher. So
well, teaching and coaching are very aligned. And my company, I called Crimson Coaching. And a lot of people, crimson is the color of Harvard, which is why I chose that color. Okay. And then coaching is because that's really what I do, right? To coach kids to achieve their highest potential. And there's so much overlap between teaching and coaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I always say that, I'm just not a classroom teacher then.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to trying to teach my son things, I'm math specifically, I was good at math, but I would forget, you don't use it, you lose it. Right.
Right. Well, and the other reason why a lot of parents wind up making their way to me is even if they know the material, people can get unfortunately much more impatient with their own kids. Someone like me, I actually don't have my own children, but I have a lot of patience with children, probably a lot more with kids than I do with adults, to be really honest with you. And the kids can be open about not knowing something because they know I'm not going to get mad or impatient with them. And it seems to be sort of more harmonious relationship that way than when sometimes a parent tries to tutor their own child.
Yeah. I always tell my son, because I was one of those kids whose parents got frustrated with, trying to teach me things. And so I know that that's a thing for me. And I know that I have limited skills in explaining certain things. And so I'll tell him, okay, so XYZ. And if he's like, I don't get it, I say, okay, we're going to go to Google now or YouTube because, and he'll be like, no, I want you to show me. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. I'm not I'm your mom, not your teacher. Right. And I'm happy to help you, but I explained it the way that I know how to explain it. Right. So if my way didn't work, we're going to need to find another way because I don't know what other way is going to work for you. And we have a beautiful tool called YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. I'll never forget when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade learning pre-algebra, and my mom looked over my shoulder and she patted me on the shoulder and she said, "You're on your own now," because, she didn't know algebra at all. So, I mean, it is wonderful. How did your son take it when you said, okay, we're going to go to Google or YouTube?
He did. Eventually he got to the point where he was just in this state of frustration when we even started. And so what I learned from a very close friend of mine is that when we're in that mode of, fight, flight, or freeze, that we're not in learning mode. Yeah. And so, so I know that even I wasn't taking that personally, that he wasn't getting it the way that I was explaining it. He was frustrated. He said, YouTube videos are long. And I said, well, let's find the shortest one. Let's start there. Right. So that was, so part of it was just like trying to get him to get out of the fight or flight.
Yeah.
And out of that. And cause he's really good at math. So there was another extra level of frustration that he was one of like 2 kids that didn't get it, that didn't get the answer to this correct.
And how old is he?
He's going to be 13 next week.
Okay. Yeah. And at that age, their friends' opinions of them are really important. And so if he's used to being a person who gets it and now all of a sudden he doesn't and everybody else got it, that's very also gets at the core of their vulnerability, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been something we've been dealing with. Like he just got his haircut because his friends didn't like his hair, and he's getting, and the way that it came out when he was telling me about it was that they were bullying him. And I'm like, well, that's not really what friends do, And he said, well, actually the next day after we got his haircut, he said, well, it was actually 2 of my friends were saying that my hair would look better if I did it this way. And so I wanted to try that. And then and I was like, okay, and we had the whole bullying conversation about it too, because, it's not about the hair, it's about the teasing. Like you might still get teased in this situation. So,
yeah.
But we're getting new shoes. Like it's a whole thing that's happening right now that is, that's very interesting to watch from a human behavior standpoint.
Yeah.
And from a mom standpoint too, and just kind of having the balance between, what's just being this people pleaser to make everybody happy and giving away yourself and discovering what you like on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what
Absolutely.
are the age groups that you work with? I think you might have said it in the beginning, but
So I will start working with kids right around your son's age, around 13. That's about the youngest usually that I work with. The bulk of students are in high school, and my sort of two biggest services or most used services are test prep for things like the SAT or the ACT, and then college essay coaching. So sort of 10th, I see a lot of 10th, 11th, 12th graders. But then I also will work with some families of kids in 8th and 9th grade on things like college counseling, on things like what extracurriculars should he choose in order to, set himself up. Some students know they would like to go to an Ivy League school, for example, or, what kinds of passion projects can she do in order to, become more competitive. Those things usually take longer term. They're usually longer term projects than studying for the SAT or the ACT. So, the earlier students come to me, usually the better. And then, of course, just academic tutoring. So, I was a history teacher, but as somebody who went to Harvard, I'm kind of nerdy. I like a lot of different subjects. And so I would say about 98% of the tutoring myself, and I'll do all the different subjects except for science and upper math. So pre-calculus and calculus I don't do. So right now, for example, I'm working with one boy in AP US history. That's a big one since I used to teach that myself.
very cool. And so I'm imagining that this is lighting you up more than the 10 years of doing the classroom setting.
Well, it's funny. I often say that being in the trenches sort of for 10 years really helped me to understand how teenagers think, because I was surrounded by so many of them for so long, right? And that insight has really, I think, made me a better tutor. For example, I was once tutoring a boy, a 12-year-old boy. And, most 12-year-old boys are pretty fidgety, it's hard for them to sit still. But Cooper was on, I thought, an extreme and the dad was a single dad. And I just said to him, after about the third time I met with Cooper, because I usually wait until the third time to ever bring up anything to a parent, because I want to make sure what I'm seeing isn't just a one-off. I said, by the way, have you ever thought that maybe Cooper might have ADHD? And he said, yes, well, his teacher suggested that, but she has 30 kids in the class and she's only 24 years old. So I didn't sort of give it much credence. And I said, well, I'm one-on-one with Cooper and I'm 44. I was 44 at the time. I said, and I've known hundreds of boys this age in the course of my career. And I haven't met many with his level of hyperactivity. So you might just, I said, I'm not a neuropsychiatrist. I can't diagnose, but you might want to get it checked out. 6 months later, I was actually at a social event at his house. He took me aside and he said, I just want to thank you. You've changed my family's life. I got him tested. He does have ADHD. He's now on medication and an exercise and nutritional regime, and he's a completely changed kid. And had I not had that 10 years of classroom experience, I could never tell the dad something like that. And I might not even know how to broach it. And, there have been since then I would say about 6 other students who I've sort of correctly but informally diagnosed. And that makes a big difference, not just in terms of the kid's self-esteem of knowing, oh, I'm not bad, because kids with ADHD often get labeled as bad or badly behaved or something, but also there's a big academic difference because now they can concentrate in school when they're being properly treated. And many of them qualify for time and a half on tests. So for something like the SAT, that's a game changer for a lot of kids. I've seen kids' scores skyrocket when they get the proper accommodation. So, that's the sort of thing where, look, when I was 19, did I do good tutoring for $20 an hour? Sure. I helped my neighborhood, other kids who are younger than me. But now, after so many years of experience, I think that all of that just makes me a better tutor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your story reminds me of my coach who trained me. Used to be a math teacher, and in seventh grade math teacher. And there was one of the things that the teachers in the school would do is warn the new teacher about the old students, right?
Yeah. Which were the bad kids.
The bad kids, exactly. And so, and he hated that practice, but they all talked about this one kid, and I don't remember his name, and it's not.
Yeah.
But so this kid came up to his teacher, Sean, and said, the stuff that you're teaching is mind-numbing to these children. That's what this kid who was diagnosed with ADHD or whatever,
wow,
different things that he'd been diagnosed with.
Right.
And so Sean brought him his calculus book from college.
Wow.
And he said, well, chew on this. And he sat there the whole period completely engulfed in this material because he was teaching himself something that was interesting to him and not learning the mind-numbing topic, right? And so it goes back to this individual support,
right?
I think is important, where our system isn't set up for the individuals. It's set up, it has its purpose to teach people what it's meant to teach people, and it's not set up for the outliers. And so I love what you're doing to help the outliers, because we all need this individual help sometimes.
Absolutely. I'm recalling another couple of examples. One girl that I was working with on her college essay this fall was driving her mom a little crazy because it seemed like she was procrastinating, wouldn't do anything, any homework in between sessions. And so, I let the mom know, by the way, Lauren is just not producing. I'm letting her work during the session. And finally, the mom just said, that's fine. I'll pay you just to read your email, because I do it virtually. I tutor virtually. So Lauren would write while I would just be there with her, right? And the mom was accepting of it, but I could tell she was frustrated. And I said, look, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Lauren had a bone marrow transplant and had been sick her entire life and missed long periods of school where she was out of school. And I said, I only had this experience where a kid needed me with them as they were writing with one other student, and she had a brain tumor and missed her whole 11th grade. And so I think that there was something, maybe social emotional that the kid was missing, that they lacked the confidence to be able to do it alone, and they needed a coach by their side while they were doing it. And so I was glad to be able to not only help the kid in that moment, but also help the parent to say, look, it's not your kid's fault. They're not being oppositional. They're just not able to do this at that time, and that's what they needed. And it made the mom feel a lot better that she knew of another kid who had been through a traumatic medical incident that needed that same support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be a really supportive thing if parents specifically, since that's who's listening, if we could take the language or the idea of I have a bad kid out of our brain, and get into curiosity mode of what is going on that's creating this behavior or this circumstance. And from experience, I can say like it lessens the frustration because my kid's not being bad. My kid's trying to communicate something that they don't know that they don't even know they're trying to communicate it sometimes. Right. So they don't know what's going on. I use this example because it's recent and real for me. My son, we just recently discovered that he has a pretty high gluten intolerance.
Oh, wow.
And we discovered this by just eliminating gluten from our diet. And 10 days into it, he said, I didn't know that I could eat food without my stomach hurting.
Oh.
And I mean, he's 12. And I'm noticing so we still eat a lot of the same food that's just gluten-free. And he likes pancakes now. And I always was so annoyed that he didn't like pancakes because it's like, it's a thing you can go to the restaurant and order pancake breakfast. It's like, it's something that I know that he would eat, but he wouldn't like it. But now he does. And so it's just like having this kind of curiosity instead of irritation. The irritation didn't serve anything in that situation. It just made me irritated. But now I have this compassion. This poor kid didn't know that your stomach wasn't supposed to hurt. Right. Yeah. Kind of off the topic of tutoring, but
no, it relates to my story about the mom who was irritated with her kid who wasn't writing the college essay, but she just needed a little bit more support.
And so when should parents seek you out?
Well, it's really depending on what they need. If you've got like this high achiever 8th grader that I'm working with, 8th grade is not too soon to start like planning and counseling towards college. 9th grade as well. I would say in terms of for test prep, probably reach out to me in the 10th grade. Back when I went to college, we really took the SAT as 11th graders. Now more and more kids are taking it in 10th grade because they have the math knowledge for it, and because the 11th grade is so busy with college prep courses like AP courses. So they're trying to get it done by the beginning of 11th grade. And then if they're interested in, college essays, I would say anytime in the second half of 11th grade. And a lot of families also need support in building a college list. They don't know, well, what are reach schools? What are some target schools? So I also help families build college lists. And that, again, is usually around the 11th grade. I do often get requests in the beginning of 12th grade, but I would say try not to wait that long, because then you're going to be super stressed out while you're doing all this. So 11th grade is usually the perfect time to start all those things.
Awesome. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms listening?
Not so much a piece of advice, although I do have a great book. It's not necessarily new, but I think it's great. It's called The Gift of Failure, and it's by a New York Times author named Jessica Fahey. And it really kind of makes the argument for, stepping back, for parents to step back and let our kids fail. And I think that that's something that this generation of parents finds really difficult to do. And oftentimes because the stakes are so high, right? When college costs $80,000 a year, I got to make sure all my kids' ducks are in a row so that that investment pays off. And I understand that, but I have also seen the flip side through actual students of mine, like one who got a perfect score on her ACT, not because I'm such a great ACT tutor. I'm pretty good, but not that good. The kid was brilliant. But when she got to college, she almost flunked out her freshman year because she didn't have mom on her back of telling her when all of her papers needed to be handed in. So mom calls me around this time, second semester freshman year, saying, will you be her time management coach and organizational coach? And I was, and that family had the means to do that, but it would be much better if the stepping back happened in, say, 7th grade, when the stakes are not so high, than freshman year in college, right?
Yeah, I have a client that, like, that book is her homework assignment now because and the thing that is present for a lot of parents right now is this fear that if they fail, they're going to take their life, because that's what's going on in specifically in LA. There was like maybe 5 students that did in a series of 6 months in a short amount of time. And part of that is because the failure is not being learned. The value of failure is not being learned at a younger age.
Right.
And maybe that stems from everybody gets a trophy, and who knows where it comes from specifically, but there's a lot of pressure to not let our kids feel this failure. But it is part of life, and it is a skill that needs to be learned. And it's definitely a conversation that I've had with my son, where he just puts his own pressure on the fear on this failure. So yeah, I might have to make that my homework.
It's a great book. And look, I consider myself a recovering perfectionist, right? I will always have these perfectionist tendencies, but I also became a yoga teacher. So like, I feel like I do things to kind of talk myself off that ledge. But I also know that it's even harder if it's your child, right? Because in so many ways, your child's a reflection of you. And I think to divorce oneself from that, right, and say, no, my worth as a person is not reflected in what college my kid gets into or what grade they got on the SAT, right? That's really hard for a lot of people. Especially, I would say, if they were the type who were high achieving perfectionists themselves, right? Imagine if you had a kid who was not that. And I've seen that in families, and my heart aches for those kids because I can tell that they feel they're not living up to their parents' expectations. That's a really hard position to be in, I think.
That is definitely, I consider myself lucky that I recognized my connection to my child as an extension of me, and so they're judging me based on him. I caught that fairly early on.
Oh, good.
So, but like that's something that I support parents with, because it's
Great.
they are their own individual, and they are not many versions of you.
Even though they might look like you. Yeah. Yeah.
Even though my son looks like his dad, so there. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Can you tell our listeners where to find you?
Sure. So if they want to learn a little bit more about me, you can go to my website, which is crimsoncoaching.com. And if they want to send me an email, they can either go to that contact page on that website or just email me directly at info@crimsoncoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being here and for what you're doing in kids' lives, because it makes a difference to achieve things, but also you're coming from this lens of it's okay to fail also. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah. And I mean, my philosophy ultimately is, achieving to one's potential, right? So everybody's goals should not look the same, but achieving what you want to achieve, that's what I'm here for, right? And so, yeah, I'm very blessed in that I love what I do.
Let's have more people doing what they love to do, and we'll have a happier place, or a
I
happier
agree.
place to live, right?
I agree. Yeah.
All right. Well, there'll be another episode of Imperfect Momming for you all coming next week. And until we meet again, keep healing. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit coachalysialyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. And until we meet again, keep healing.